The alien kingdom was a realm of breathtaking beauty, a symphony of shimmering crystals and endless skies. Yet, amidst this grandeur, the princess sat alone in her opulent chamber, staring at the stars through her window. She was the ruler's daughter, a figure of reverence, admired for her grace and power. But admiration did little to ease her solitude. Her life was one of duty, an unending cycle of ceremonies, diplomacy, and expectations. Her people looked to her for strength, but none truly saw her as a person. They saw a symbol, a future queen who would one day marry for the good of the kingdom. That marriage had already been arranged, a union meant to secure alliances. Her betrothed was a noble from a neighboring star system, a figure of ambition, cold calculation, and little affection. He saw her not as a partner, but as a pawn in a game of power. Every moment of her existence was dictated by tradition. Her laughter was measured, her thoughts guarded, and her dreams silenced. The palace walls, adorned with priceless treasures, felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. No one questioned her isolation. After all, a princess had no need for companionship, only responsibility. But one night, the monotony of her life shifted. A faint, otherworldly glow appeared in her private garden. Drawn by curiosity, she ventured out, her silken robes trailing behind her. There, nestled among the flowers, was a portal, a swirling vortex of light and energy. It pulsed with an invitation, a promise of the unknown. Her heart raced as she stepped closer. For the first time in her life, she was faced with a choice entirely her own. The decision to step through wasn't driven by duty or obligation, but by the pure, unrelenting desire to escape. Without hesitation, she entered, leaving behind the weight of her crown and the suffocating expectations of her people. She emerged on Earth, a place starkly different from her home. The air was crisp, the ground solid beneath her feet, and the sky painted in shades of twilight. The simplicity of the landscape was striking, a stark contrast to the ethereal beauty of her kingdom. For a moment, she felt free, untethered by the chains of her royal identity. In the distance, she spotted flickering lights, the glow of a human military base nestled in the forest. Her curiosity led her closer, her steps cautious but determined. She observed the soldiers from a distance, captivated by their camaraderie, their laughter, and their humanity. Among them, one figure stood out. He wasn't the tallest or the most commanding, but there was a warmth to him, a quiet strength that drew her gaze. She didn't know his name, but something about him stirred a feeling she had long buried, a yearning for connection, for companionship, for love. As the night deepened, she retreated into the shadows, her heart conflicted yet alive with possibilities. For the first time in her existence, the alien princess felt something other than loneliness. Jake was a soldier who had always followed the rules. Discipline and duty defined his days, leaving little room for anything else. Yet beneath his calm exterior, there was a restlessness he couldn't quite name. His fiancée, Emily, was waiting for him back home, her letters filled with love and anticipation for their future together. She was everything he thought he wanted, kind, dependable, and endlessly supportive. But her words no longer ignited the spark they once did. Each day at the base followed a predictable rhythm: patrols, drills, and camaraderie with his fellow soldiers. Jake took comfort in the routine, yet he felt trapped by it. His relationship with Emily felt the same, safe but stagnant, filled with unspoken doubts. He hadn't admitted it to himself, but he longed for something more, something that could shake him out of the monotony of his carefully constructed life. That night, while on a routine patrol, Jake encountered her. She appeared out of nowhere, her presence so unexpected it left him momentarily speechless. She was beautiful, but there was something otherworldly about her, a mysteriousness that set her apart. She claimed she was lost, her voice soft and almost musical. Jake offered to help, not realizing that this one act of kindness would unravel his entire world. As they walked through the forest, they talked. She asked questions that caught him off guard, about his dreams, his fears, and whether he was truly happy with his life. Jake found himself opening up to her in ways he hadn't even done with Emily. There was a depth to her, a raw honesty that felt both comforting and unnerving. When she spoke of loneliness, Jake recognized the same longing he carried within himself. Though he couldn't quite place it, there was an unspoken bond forming between them, an understanding that transcended the barriers of language or origin. Her presence awakened something in him, a sense of possibility, of escape from the constraints of his duty and his carefully planned future. That night, Jake couldn't stop thinking about her. He tried to push her out of his mind, reminding himself of Emily, of his responsibilities. But her image lingered, her words replaying in his thoughts. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met. She was enigmatic, untethered by the rules and expectations that governed his life. Days passed, and Jake found himself looking for her during his patrols. When he finally saw her again, it was as if the world shifted. They spoke again, their conversations growing more intimate. She didn't reveal much about herself, but what she did share captivated him. Her curiosity about his world, her fascination with human emotions, and the way she seemed to see right through him. Jake was drawn to her in ways he couldn't explain. Yet guilt began to creep in. Emily's letters arrived regularly, her words filled with love and hope. Jake read them, but they felt hollow compared to the emotions swirling within him. He knew he was crossing a line, but he couldn't stop himself. This mysterious woman, whoever she was, had ignited something in him that he couldn't ignore. Jake and the princess began meeting in secret. Each encounter drew them closer, their connection deepening with every word shared, every glance exchanged. She finally revealed her truth to him, unable to keep her identity hidden any longer. Her form shimmered before his eyes, transforming into something extraordinary, ethereal and unearthly. For a moment, he was overwhelmed by disbelief and fear, but then he saw her vulnerability, the same loneliness she had confessed before. It didn't matter that she wasn't human. What mattered was how she made him feel, alive in a way he hadn't been in years. Their conversations became more than just exchanges of words. They were confessions, admissions of desires and fears they had never spoken aloud. She shared stories of her kingdom, her betrothed, and the suffocating expectations that had driven her to flee. Jake, in turn, spoke of Emily and the life he had planned, a life that now felt like a distant obligation rather than a dream. As days turned into weeks, their stolen moments became harder to resist. Jake began lying to his commanding officer, sneaking out during his patrols to meet her. Each time he saw her, the guilt he carried weighed heavier, but it was nothing compared to the pull he felt toward her. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, and the emotions she stirred within him were undeniable. One night, during a rare quiet moment at the base, Jake sat with one of Emily's letters in his hands. He tried to focus on her words, but they felt like echoes from a life that no longer belonged to him. He thought of the princess instead, her laughter, her curiosity, the way she made him question everything he thought he knew about himself. For the first time, he realized he couldn't pretend anymore. When they met again, the tension between them was palpable. They no longer needed words to express what they felt. It was clear in the way their hands brushed, in the way they lingered too close. That night, the boundaries they had been clinging to shattered completely. Jake kissed her, and she kissed him back, their connection transcending everything that had once held them apart. The passion between them was intoxicating, consuming, but it wasn't without its cost. Jake couldn't shake the guilt he felt for betraying Emily, for lying to his comrades. Yet with the princess, he felt free in a way he had never experienced before. She gave him a token, a glowing artifact from her world, a symbol of the bond they shared. It was beautiful, otherworldly, and dangerous, just like their love. But love couldn't exist in a vacuum. Their affair didn't go unnoticed. Jake's distraction caught the attention of his commanding officer, who began to question his loyalty. At the same time, the princess's absence was discovered, and her people began searching for her. The weight of their choices loomed over them, threatening to unravel the fragile world they had built together. The fragile illusion they had created came crashing down when Emily unexpectedly arrived at the base. She had written to Jake about her plans to visit, but in his preoccupation, he hadn't replied. Her excitement turned to confusion the moment she saw the artifact sitting on his desk, a strange, glowing object that pulsed faintly, unlike anything she had ever seen. Jake's face betrayed him. There was no explanation he could give that would make sense, no words to cover the truth. When Emily confronted him, Jake confessed. He spoke of the princess, their meetings, and the feelings he could no longer deny. Emily listened, her disbelief quickly turning into anger and heartbreak. She demanded to know how he could betray her after everything they had shared. Jake could offer no justification. He could only admit that what he felt for the princess was unlike anything he had ever known. Emily left, her tears a stark reminder of the damage he had done. Jake sat alone, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He knew he had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, yet part of him couldn't regret it. The princess had awakened something in him, a sense of purpose, a connection he had never felt before. But as the echoes of Emily's departure faded, reality began to set in. The princess's people had found her. A ship descended from the sky, its light cutting through the darkness. Jake rushed to their meeting place, desperate to see her one last time. She was surrounded by her kind, their forms shimmering with a brilliance that made her seem even more alien, more untouchable. Among them was her betrothed, a towering figure whose anger was palpable. The confrontation was inevitable. Her betrothed saw Jake not as a rival, but as an insect, a weak, insignificant creature unworthy of her attention. When Jake tried to protect her, the noble struck him down, a single blow that left him gasping for breath. The princess cried out, placing herself between them, pleading for mercy. Her defiance only deepened the noble's rage. In the end, it was her decision. The princess knew she couldn't stay. Her people needed her, and Jake's world could never accept her. She knelt beside him, her touch gentle as she whispered her goodbye. She placed the glowing artifact in his hand, her final gift, a piece of her world, a reminder of what they had shared. Jake watched as she was led away, her figure growing smaller as the ship ascended into the night sky. He stayed there long after she was gone, the pain in his chest far deeper than his physical wounds. When he finally returned to the base, he found himself a man changed. Emily was gone, and so was the princess. He had lost both, and yet he carried the memory of their love, a love that was as fleeting as it was unforgettable. The artifact remained with him, its faint glow a constant reminder of the choices he had made and the love that could never truly be his.